Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today we are in Chinon and we're looking at the Domaine de la Noblaie 2014 Les Chiens Chiens Chinon. Domaine de la Noblaie has been on my radar now for quite some time. I think my first tasting with Jérôme Billard was at Pro Wine, likely back in 2010. And every single time I had an opportunity to attend that fair, I always made a point of passing by Jérôme's stand to retaste the wines. Today's wine is a 2014 vintage. It's one that I've had in my cellar for quite some time. So it's great to have finally opened this today and used it as an opportunity to share a little bit more information about Domaine de la Noblaie, their vineyards, as well as provide some details on the commune of Ligré. So where the domaine is located, this place, this Lieu-dit called La Noblaie, has a very rich viticultural history that dates back over 500 years, possibly even several centuries older than that. The Cassini family, who were the first to create maps of the Kingdom of France back in the mid-1700s, noted this place of La Noblaie as an important lieu-dit on one of their maps dating to 1765. The Lieu-dit is located in the hamlet called Vau Breton, which was first recorded in historical documents back in 1698. Vau in Old French means valley, and of course Breton refers to the local name for Cabernet Franc. So this village was referred to as the Cabernet Franc Valley at least as far back as 1698. Now, fast forward to the modern era, and Jérôme's grandparents, Pierre and Jacqueline Manzagol, they purchased this domaine and its 3 hectares of vineyards back in 1952. Jérôme's first vintage was 2003, which also happened to be the estate's 50th vintage. And today the estate is up around 24 hectares worth of vines, and they're all farmed organically. Now, to continue on our journey exploring the communes of Chinon with a little bit more detail, this commune of Ligré is on the south side of the left bank of the Vienne River, and we're directly opposite the eastern portion, I should say, of the commune of Chinon. So we're more or less right smack dab in the middle of the Chinon appellation here. Uniquely though, Ligré is one of the few communes in Chinon that does not have a border that butts up against the Vienne River. Rather, the commune of Rivière, which is just north of Ligré, that borders the river, and then Ligré starts just south of there. So as a result, none of the vineyards in Ligré are actually on the alluvial terrace. So we have no alluvial soils in Ligré. Now, to give you a lay of the land in terms of the commune, it stretches about 6.5 kilometers from north to south, but the vineyard area is concentrated in one portion in the northwest corner of the commune, and the rest of the commune essentially, from an agricultural perspective, is used for other crops. So this vineyard area stretches about 2-ish kilometers from east to west, as well as north to south, and it's concentrated in this one area where there is a very large forested area that sits at a higher elevation on a bit of a plateau, and the vineyards are essentially dotted all around this large forested area. And as a result, the vineyards actually can have a number of different exposures here in Ligré. We have vineyards that have a northern exposure, some vineyards have a southern exposure, and we almost have everything in between that. Now, in terms of soils, we actually also have a ton of variability here. We have vineyards that are sitting at a higher elevation of over 80 meters above sea level. These vineyards will typically be on the Sinonian era hydromorphic clays that are mixed with flint, and they sit atop the upper Turonian tufa bedrock. And then the vineyards that are on the lower lying slopes, less than 80 meters above sea level, these will be either on the upper Turonian yellow tufa chalk or the middle Turonian white micaceous tufa chalk, depending on where the vines are around this forested area, as well as where they're situated on the slope. Now, in terms of topsoil, we actually have a ton of variability here too. Some vineyards are on almost all sand in terms of the topsoil. Then we have some vineyards that are on a sand, silt, clay mix. Then we have some vineyards that also have a bit more of a clay influence in terms of the topsoil as well. So between the exposures, between the different soils and bedrock influences, there's a lot of variability here. There's a lot of diversity, and it's a bit difficult to generalize, well, what is an expression of Chinon from Ligré? You kind of have to know where the vigneron, where the parcels are, what soils do they have, what exposures do they have, because these viticultural factors will then inform the vigneron's decisions in the cellar, and that will influence the finished style of the wine. So today's wine is coming from a 4.5 hectare parcel of vines from a single lieu-dit called Les Chiens Chiens. And the vines range in age. We have vines as old as 1945 in terms of the planting date, and then we have the youngest vines that were planted in 2002. And we are sitting at a slightly higher elevation here, just above 80 meters above sea level. So we are on that Sinonian era hydromorphic clay subsoil, and then there's about 40 centimeters of a kaolinite clay on top of that, and then we have a stonier topsoil that is clay dominant as well, and there's a lot of flint pebbles in the topsoil as well. And this actually, this combination of these three soils combined is actually known locally as connuelle. Now, from a winemaking perspective, all this fruit was hand harvested and destemmed, and then it was transferred into vat via gravity, and then fermentation takes place with indigenous yeast, and there's a maceration via infusion. It remains about 3 weeks on skins, and Jérôme did note that in 2014 they did do a little bit of pigeage during the maceration time, and then after the maceration the wine is racked off its skins, and then they transfer it into 500-liter oak barrels where it rests for about 15 months before bottling. Now, a little story about this wine in terms of how it came to be. It came to be in 2003 when Jérôme was doing a barrel tasting with his U.S. importer, John David Hendrick. And John David became quite partial to one of the barrels from Les Chiens Chiens, and as a result, they started bottling this as a single vineyard wine, and it's been that way ever since. So, let's dive in. Now immediately there's a nice mix of fresh as well as dried fruits on the nose, which stands to reason. It's a 2014. This wine has seen some bottle age, but the fruits lean a bit more, I would say, red fruit driven, and I'm getting a touch of even a blue fruited note, but a bit of cherry. Yeah, fresh and dried cherry. There's even a little bit of a sour cherry note there too. And there is, while it's not super aromatic, there is a nice perfume to this wine, which I would describe as sandalwood. And the pyrazines are on equal footing. I would call this wine savory or earthy, and they come through for me as a cedarwood note. And also there's a bit of that forest floor thing that we like to say, as well as some autumn leaves. But really pretty nose, and I love the tertiary elements to the nose, because this is why we hold on to wine, is because it gets all these layers and complexities and everything like this. So it's great to get into wines like this. Now there is a ton of acidity on this wine. Very bright, really alive, really mouth-watering. I can feel my mouth salivating here. The same fruits come through really nicely. There's an additional dried cranberry note on the palate, which I really like. And then we're getting into other tertiary layers here, like mushroom, bit of leather. And there's a nice spiciness to the palate as well, which is a bit more pronounced than I was expecting. But there is a great cinnamon note as well as a bit of clove too. In terms of the tannins, there's a decent amount of tannin here. They're firm, they're fine-grained, and they almost are a little bit fuzzy or powdery in terms of their texture. And they have that almost like a corduroy in terms of the feel. But there's a nice amount of tannin here, good amount of chew, good amount of grip, some decent structure, and I think it's in balance with where the wine is at from a fruit perspective as well as the acidity. And then the wine sits a bit more broadly on the palate. There is a bit more flesh here, and it does sit more round in the mouth, and there is a bit more of a fuller middle palate experience, which I think stands to reason. Everything that I've read with regards to these Sinonian era clays mixed with flint is sort of the tale of two soils here. We have the clay that gives power and intensity and fruit to the wine, which I am getting here, but then the flint is said to counter that with added finesse and elegance. And this wine is doing that. There's concentration, there's intensity, there's body here, and there is a bit of fleshiness, but at the same time, it's balanced really nicely by a sense of levity and elegance as well as restraint. It's actually been ages since I've had any of the wines from Domaine de la Noblaie, and given that this is the holidays, it's such a treat to open older wine, especially bottles that you've been hanging on to for quite some time. If you have a favorite Chinon, let me know what it is in the comments below, and of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.